In 2008, Wall Street's reckless gambles imploded the global economy. Banks intoxicated by greed played fast and loose with toxic mortgages, leading to a catastrophic collapse. Millions of Americans lost their homes and livelihoods. The government's response, a massive bailout, courtesy of the American taxpayer to the very institutions that orchestrated the disaster. This blatant cronyism ignited public fury, birthing movements like the Tea Party, which vowed to dismantle the systems enabling such corruption. What actually happened in 2008 is rarely explained clearly. Banks made loans to people who couldn't realistically afford them, no income checks, no real risk assessment. These junk loans were bundled into investments called mortgage-backed securities, MBS, which were then stamped AAA by ratings agencies and sold off to investors as safe. But once homeowners started defaulting en masse, those MBS became worthless. Investment banks began collapsing like dominoes. To stop a full-blown meltdown, the U.S. Treasury created the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. This wasn't a handout to the people who lost their homes. It was a direct injection of capital into banks like Citigroup, Bank of America, and AIG. The excuse, these firms were too big to fail. The reality, the people got foreclosed, the banks got bonuses. Let's break it down further. Goldman Sachs executives were caught in internal emails calling their own mortgage-backed deals one shitty deal. Citigroup whistleblower Richard Bowen warned in 2006 that 60% of the mortgages Citi was buying were defective. Over 80% by 2007. He notified the board. They ignored him. Deutsche Bank traders called the assets they were selling crap. Washington Mutual deliberately dumped known bad loans on clients. A 2011 Senate report and 2013 DOJ settlement showed JP Morgan and others knew their securities were junk and sold them anyway. They made billions before it collapsed and got billions more to clean it up. Fast forward to 2020, a new crisis emerges, a global pandemic. The economy teeters on the brink once more. And how does Washington respond? By dusting off the same old playbook. The CARES Act, a staggering $2.2 trillion package, is rolled out under the guise of relief. But who benefits? Once again, the lion's share lines the pockets of corporate giants and financial institutions. Here's how it played out. Congress passed the CARES Act, and the Federal Reserve opened up emergency credit facilities. They brought in BlackRock, yes, the same BlackRock that manages trillions in assets and owns stakes in nearly every major company, to decide which companies should be rescued. And then BlackRock used those public funds to buy $1.4 billion of its own exchange-traded funds, ETFs. That's like putting someone in charge of disaster relief, then watching them send the supplies to their own warehouse first. Quantitative easing, this magical phrase tossed around by media, meant the Fed created new money and used it to buy bonds. When the Fed buys bonds, it drives down interest rates and props up prices. That inflates the stock market and props up corporations drowning in debt. It's great for Wall Street, not so great for the corner diner that just got shut down. Hedge funds like Citadel had placed massive leverage bets that required markets to remain stable. One such position was the basis trade, where they exploited small price differences between treasury bonds and related futures. When markets panicked, the price gap widened and those trades started bleeding. If the Fed hadn't stepped in with $1.6 trillion in liquidity, the hedge funds would have imploded. Instead, the Fed's sudden intervention locked in their gains and buried their losses without ever saying it was a bailout. Let's be crystal clear, 2008 and 2020 weren't different. They were reruns. Both times, the financial elite made reckless bets, and when the system cracked, Washington didn't let them fail. It wrote them a blank check. In 2008, it was subprime mortgages. In 2020, it was over-leveraged trades and corporate debt. Different surface crisis, same underlying grift. The government rushed to protect capital markets, asset prices, and insiders. and left everyone else to suffer. The playbook didn't change, only the branding did. Even years later, people act like the 2008 bailout was a unique sin. Sean Davis recently reminded everyone, remember when the biggest Wall Street banks on earth dumped all their garbage mortgage-backed securities on unsuspecting buyers, then turned around and demanded hundreds of billions of dollars in bailouts because of the trash securities they created? And the politicians all just went along with it? He's not wrong, but what's missing is that the same playbook ran again under Trump. Same banks, same Fed, same bailouts. Only this time, MAGA didn't just go along with it. They defended it like it was doctrine. Trump didn't directly engineer the bailout, but he never spoke against it either. He certainly didn't use his platform to call it what it was. In fact, he pressured the Fed to keep interest rates low. Silence is consent when your name is on the check. One man refused to rubber stamp the grift. Enter Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky. Amid the unanimous chorus singing the praises of the CARES Act, Massie stood alone demanding accountability. He insisted on a recorded vote, challenging the House to put their decisions on the record. For this act of defiance, he was vilified. President Trump called him a third-rate grandstander, said he should be thrown out of the Republican Party. MAGA influencers, those fearless populists, suddenly turned into establishment enforcers, branding Massie a traitor for wanting transparency. Massie wasn't blocking relief. He was demanding accountability because he saw what this bill really was, a Wall Street feeding frenzy wrapped in a flag. Senator Lindsey Graham, of course, had no such objections. He championed the legislation, talking about helping small business and protecting workers. But this is the same Graham who's never met a bailout or a foreign war he didn't like. He's been a reliable yes man for Big Pharma, Wall Street, and the military-industrial complex. MAGA once claimed to hate people like him. Now they invite him on stage. Graham represents everything MAGA claimed to reject: endless spending, corporate favoritism, globalist wars, and total loyalty to donor-class interests. But for some reason, he's still treated like family, while Massie gets called a traitor. The irony is palpable. MAGA, a movement birthed from the frustration of 2008's betrayals, found itself in 2020 defending the very mechanisms it once sought to destroy. The same bailouts, the same corporate favoritism, the same erosion of middle America, all met with a deafening silence, or worse, applause. Try pointing out that 2020 followed the exact same Wall Street bailout script as 2008 and watch the MAGA meltdown begin. Say Trump was silent while hedge funds were rescued, and you'll hear this. You realize he's talking about 2008, right? 2020 was nothing like the housing crash. Then come the IQ-shattering rebuttals. Good Lord, you are a special idiot. That was 2008, buddy. No, Trump was not in office. MAGA doesn't want truth. It wants emotional comfort food. It wants to pretend the same Wall Street pigs didn't feast under their guy. Point it out, and you're the problem. Not the bailout, not the silence, not the trillion-dollar handoff. You. What made it worse was the betrayal came from the inside. In 2008, MAGA didn't exist yet, but the anger that birthed it did. The system bailed out the elite, crushed the worker, and the people raged. In 2020, the system did it again. Only now, MAGA was on the team. They called it strategy. They called it leadership. In reality, it was betrayal. The exact same crime, just with a different marketing team. America First, under the leadership of Nick Fuentes, refuses to be blinded by branding. It recognizes that the betrayals of 2008 and 2020 are not anomalies. They're a blueprint. The ruling class has one rule: bail out their friends, tell the rest to wait. And if you question it, you're labeled an extremist. America First doesn't care about those labels. It cares about truth. It cares about holding every single politician accountable, no matter what hat they wear. That's what real America first means. No sacred cows, no special treatment for hedge funds, no corporate welfare, no bailouts for billionaires while families lose homes, no loyalty to donors, think tanks, or cable hosts, just loyalty to the people. That's what MAGA once pretended to be. That's what America first actually is. The parallels between 2008 and 2020 are undeniable. In both, the elite were shielded from consequences while the public bore the cost. In both, the financial system was rescued before a single working class American saw relief. And in both, the illusion of reform was used to pacify revolt. The result? The same robbery, twice, only the second time the victims clapped. 2008 and 2020 followed the same script. The same predators got rich. The same victims were told to wait. The only thing that changed was who was cheering. In 2008, the pitchforks came out. In 2020, MAGA handed the bankers a bigger bag and said, "Do it again." And they did. If you're still defending Wall Street bailouts because your guy was in office when they happened, you're not fighting for America. You're just protecting the grift. America First didn't forget what 2008 looked like. It didn't forget who got paid, who got crushed, and who got lied to. And it sure as hell didn't forget that 2020 was the same heist, only bigger, faster, and protected by the same people who once promised to stop it. This wasn't populism, this was betrayal with branding.